Hi, my name is Katie, and I'm doing the play Do You Feel Anger by Mara Nelson Greenberg. If my production was a color, I would say that it was different hues of blue, like when you go to a paint store and it has like all those different shades of blue on like a little paint card. It definitely turns different shades of blue throughout. I would say the deeper it goes, the more emotional it gets, depending on your perspective as the reader, because as a female identifying person, I got a lot sadder as the script went on because it showed scary situations that I have either been in or heard about people being in. And so it got darker blue, it got sadder for me to read, whereas maybe someone didn't have that experience, so maybe they were a lighter hue of blue. If my ideal production had a feeling, I would say that it felt like one of those kickballs from elementary school. At my school, they were rubber and they had like little squares of little lines kind of going in different, like the square lines would like go in different directions around the ball, and it kind of create like this somewhat smooth, somewhat kind of bumpy texture. And like if you pressed it really hard in your hands, you'd get the texture on your hands. And that's kind of what it feels like to me. Like if you press too hard, you get really uncomfortable in this play. Like if you analyze it really hard, it kind of hurts your heart, as it definitely hurt mine a little bit. But sometimes it can be fun to have those conversations with people about what is toxic masculinity, or to think about the play at its surface level. What is empathy? What are emotions? Like, how can you talk to people about their emotions? How can you understand other people's emotions? How can you understand your own emotions? And that can be uncomfortable, but sometimes that can be fun. It depends on the perspective that you're coming from. If my production had a sound, it would definitely be like a smoke detector that like ran out of batteries and it's just chirping. And it'd definitely be like at night, you think that everything's fine until you hear the chirp and you're like, oh my gosh, it's going off again. Can someone please go out and fix it? And then it stops for a while and you're like, okay, I can go back to bed. And then you hear beep and you're like, oh my gosh, it's doing it again. And you just get more and more annoyed. But there's always that few seconds where you think it's done and you feel at peace, and then it starts again. That's what it would sound like. I believe that this play should be done now more than ever because the play's central theme is toxic masculinity. And as our society has progressed, we faced new adversaries in this patriarchy-led world, such as Donald Trump, Harvey Weinstein, and perhaps even your toxic boss at your job where you're a barista. With full respect to the fact that toxic masculinity isn't something that can be taken out in one performance of one play, and it can't be taken out by any government mandate, this play still would hold weight if we were to do it. Whether they realize it or not, every non-male person in our society has experienced some form of toxic masculinity, whether it's an unemotional response to a question or a sexual aggression or some fit of violence. The discourse on gender equality has also greatly changed as our society has progressed. We now have movements such as the #MeToo movement and the #IBelieveWomen movement, which are both all about women lifting up and supporting one another and creating space to hear about their experiences of toxic masculinity, and all of us getting educated and learning how we can stop this and be joining together to make change. I feel I am the artist to do this play because, one, I feel like this play should be directed from a woman's perspective, especially with all the themes that it deals with. And I would bring to the production my ability to bring people together with honesty, integrity, and respect. I am a full believer in making sure everyone is comfortable in the process they've been given. I believe in the full integrity of keeping the script intact and doing it in the way that the playwright had intended. And I also want to have those hard conversations with the actors about what this material is. I don't want anyone feeling like they are being disrespected with the material or the material makes them uncomfortable. If it makes them uncomfortable, I want to talk about that in a nice, safe way. I want to make space for these conversations that the actors have. I was an actor before I was a director, and I definitely want to have discussions that are actor-led so I can listen and hear what they have to say about the production. I am a big believer in making this a production about the actors. I'm just here to hold the reins and make sure that nothing gets too out of control. I'm all about making a safe space with this process. I'm all about making sure everyone is comfortable with and understanding of the material we've been given and fully understands what we're getting into before we get into it. I want to be there to answer questions that people might have. I want to ask questions and find out what the actors have to say. I want to make this a very inclusive process.
As a woman, am I somebody who comes at face value with nothing to say from my brain, to nothing to say from my mind and what I can do? Because I can truly make a change. I can truly change the lives of the people around me. But if other people do not believe in me, that is a serious issue.
Toxic masculinity is a social science term that describes narrow, repressive types of ideas about the male gender role. It defines masculinity as exaggerated masculine traits such as being violent, unemotional, sexually aggressive, and so forth. It also suggests that by not being violent enough or being too emotional or doing anything that quote unquote real men wouldn't do would get your manhood questioned.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
I have been affected by toxic masculinity numerous times throughout my life.
Yes.
I think partially, like, yes, against me because of my gender identity. Also, like, not necessarily because I think it just exists no matter what.
You know, what's interesting is yes and no. I think a lot of it has to do with their gender identity and how they see themselves as men, which causes them to react to me and my gender identity the way that they do.
Anger, anger, and anger.
Empathy.
Sadness, but like a sadness for the other person a little bit.
And frustration. So like frustration to me is different than being irritated, because you can just brush that off. But frustration is deep because it you know, you want to fix it and you want to do something, but you don't know how.
Yes, absolutely.
100%. I absolutely think it's everywhere, even in the places we don't see it. It's just all over the place.
Although I do think it's gotten better, but I also would say that I have moved across the United States, and I think where I live now is a better community, a more open-minded community than other parts of the country where I've lived that are traditionally more closed-minded.
For me right now in the year 2021, in COVID isolation, United States of America, I find it very interesting the level of emotional burden that women and non-men mostly are the ones responsible for caring for this country.
A lot, in my opinion, a lot of toxic masculinity is based on purity culture. And I see that a lot in my home country, which is very, very religious. It's Catholic. And purity culture just doesn't allow, like, it just puts a double standard on women and just says that men are like overly sexual and all that stuff. So it's on us to have them control their emotions.
Honestly, like it's very much like racism, where it permeates all levels. It's not just at the individual level, but also at the institutional level. It's become institutionalized, it's become structural. And so you can't say it's more prevalent in one area or the other, because it's prevalent everywhere. Right, from the huge numbers of domestic violence we see to, you know, women being paid less than men or not being chosen for a job because they have a female name on their resume as opposed to a male name, to the staggering sexual assault problems we have on college campuses. Well, I think a lot, again, because it's everywhere, there are different solutions for the different types of problems that we see.
I think it starts with education when we're young.
I think we need to start like teaching male identifying people that like feelings aren't something to be afraid of.
The first thing any business, corporation, organization can do is make sure they have equal representation.
Just having role models that exhibit those behaviors and that condemn hurtful behaviors, I think would would help stop the cycle.